Imagine you are born 40,000 years ago. You cannot walk. You cannot talk. You cannot feed yourself. You cannot even hold up your own head. The nights are freezing. Wolves roam the darkness. Lions wait beyond the firelight. Disease can arrive without warning. A single mistake could end your life before your first birthday. By every measure, you are one of the weakest babies ever born. And yet, here you are. That simple fact hides an astonishing mystery. Every one of your ancestors survived long enough to grow up and have children of their own. Not just your parents, not just your grandparents. Thousands upon thousands of generations stretching back over hundreds of thousands of years. If even one newborn in that unbroken chain had failed to survive, you would never have existed. So how did ancient humans keep children alive? The answer is far more surprising than most people imagine. It wasn't because they had medicine. It wasn't because they lived in safer environments. It wasn't because children were naturally stronger. In fact, the opposite was true. Human babies may be the most vulnerable newborns in the entire animal kingdom. Compared to almost every other mammal, they arrive astonishingly unfinished. A baby giraffe falls nearly 2 meters to the ground during birth. Within an hour, it can stand. Soon after, it can run beside its mother. A newborn horse is walking within minutes. Even baby chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, cling tightly to their mothers almost immediately after birth. Human babies can do none of those things. They cannot crawl. They cannot escape danger. They cannot search for food. They cannot regulate their own body temperature very well. For months, they depend entirely on someone else for absolutely everything. That isn't a design flaw. It's one of evolution's greatest compromises. Scientists call this secondary altriciality. It sounds complicated, but the idea is surprisingly simple. Humans have enormous brains, much larger than what most mammals our size possess. Those large brains gave our ancestors extraordinary advantages. They could solve problems, remember landscapes, build tools, cooperate with strangers, plan hunts, pass knowledge from one generation to the next. But those same brains created an enormous problem. A fully developed human baby's head simply would not fit through the mother's birth canal. Evolution faced a difficult choice: produce smaller brains or give birth earlier. Nature chose the second option. Human babies are born while much of their brain development is still unfinished. At birth, a human brain is only about 1/4 of its adult size. Much of what makes us human develops after birth. That means the most important stage of brain growth happens outside the safety of the womb, where danger exists everywhere. This challenge is often described as the obstetric dilemma, and it changed the entire direction of human evolution. Because once babies became this helpless, keeping them alive was no longer just a mother's responsibility. It became everyone's responsibility. This may be one of the biggest reasons humans eventually spread across every continent on Earth. Not because we were the strongest, not because we were the fastest, but because we learned something almost no other species had ever mastered. We learned how to survive together. When people imagine prehistoric life, they often picture powerful hunters carrying spears across open plains. Strength, courage, violence. Those images are only part of the story. Behind every successful hunter, someone had to protect the children, someone had to comfort crying babies, someone had to gather food while mothers recovered from childbirth, someone had to watch over toddlers while others searched for water. Without those invisible jobs, no hunting success would have mattered. A child left alone was vulnerable to predators, to cold, to dehydration, to accidents, to countless dangers adults rarely noticed. The greatest survival technology our ancestors ever created wasn't a sharper spear. It wasn't fire. It wasn't stone tools. It was cooperation. Anthropologists call this cooperative breeding. Unlike most primates, early humans did not raise children alone. Childcare became a shared responsibility across the entire group. Mothers were never expected to carry the entire burden by themselves. Grandmothers helped. Older siblings helped. Fathers helped. Aunts, uncles, friends, even unrelated adults often took turns carrying, feeding, protecting, and comforting young children. To modernize, this may seem unusually generous. To ancient humans, it was simply survival. One exhausted mother could become sick. She could be injured. She could die. If every child depended on only one adult, entire family lines could disappear. Sharing responsibility made the whole group stronger. This is why researchers believe one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages wasn't intelligence alone. It was social intelligence. Humans became experts at helping one another. Perhaps nowhere is this more remarkable than in the role of grandmothers. Most mammals continue reproducing until near the end of their lives. Human women are different. Long after they stop having children themselves, they often remain healthy and active for decades. For years, scientists wondered why evolution would allow this. Then an intriguing explanation emerged. Today, it is known as the grandmother hypothesis. Instead of continuing to produce more children, older women dramatically increased the survival of the grandchildren already born. Their experience mattered. They knew where to find food during difficult seasons. They recognized dangerous plants. They understood childhood illnesses. They calmed frightened mothers. They carried babies when younger women became exhausted. Several studies of traditional societies have found something extraordinary. Children with a living maternal grandmother often had significantly higher survival rates than those without one. That means your own existence may owe more to a grandmother who lived thousands of years ago than to any famous king or warrior whose name appears in history books. The story of humanity was never written only by hunters. It was also written by caregivers. And perhaps that's the greatest surprise of all. The people who shaped our survival most profoundly often left behind no monuments, no statues, and no written records. Only living descendants, including you. If you're enjoying uncovering the forgotten stories history rarely tells, subscribe to Human Stories. Every week, we explore the science, history, and everyday lives that shaped our world, revealing the remarkable human experiences hidden behind the civilizations we thought we already knew. But cooperation alone wasn't enough. Keeping a helpless child alive required something even more demanding. It required feeding them. Keeping a helpless child alive required something even more demanding. It required feeding them. Modern parents often think of breastfeeding as one option, among many. For ancient humans, it was survival itself. Without safe water, without infant formula, without bottles, breast milk was often the difference between life and death. Anthropologists believe children in hunter-gatherer societies commonly breastfed for 2, 3, or even 4 years. That sounds unusual today. For most of human history, it was completely normal. Babies also fed far more frequently than many modern parents expect. Instead of eating every few hours on a schedule, infants often nursed many times throughout the day. Those frequent feedings did much more than provide calories. They regulated body temperature, reduced stress, strengthened the immune system, and even helped naturally space pregnancies, giving mothers time to recover before caring for another newborn. But perhaps the most surprising practice was something known as wet nursing. In many ancient communities, a woman might breastfeed a child that wasn't biologically her own. If a mother became sick, died during childbirth, or simply couldn't produce enough milk, another woman stepped in. To modern ears, this may sound extraordinary. To ancient humans, it was common sense. Saving one child helped strengthen the entire community. Food was shared. Knowledge was shared. Even motherhood was sometimes shared. Feeding was only one challenge. The next was keeping babies physically safe. Imagine searching for food across rough landscapes while carrying a child that cannot even sit upright. You can't leave the baby behind. Predators are everywhere. The ground is cold. The weather changes quickly. Ancient parents solved this problem in a remarkably simple way. They carried their children almost constantly. Today we call it baby wearing. For our ancestors, it was simply everyday life. Archaeologists and anthropologists believe infants spent most of their waking hours pressed against another human body. That constant contact did far more than keep babies close. It helped regulate breathing, maintained body temperature, reduced crying, and created the secure environment young brains needed to develop. Even modern neuroscience supports many of these observations. Skin-to-skin contact lowers stress hormones in both babies and caregivers. Physical closeness helps stabilize heart rate. It encourages emotional bonding. Our ancestors discovered these benefits without laboratories. They learned them through thousands of generations of observation. Eventually, every child must begin eating solid food. Ancient families faced that challenge without grocery stores, blenders, or packaged baby food. Instead, they adapted. Adults often softened food by chewing it first before giving it to young children. The practice is called premastication. It may sound strange today, yet it has been documented across cultures throughout history. Children also received soft foods that were naturally rich in nutrients. Bone marrow, cooked roots, eggs, fish, tender meat, seasonal fruits. These foods provided energy for rapidly growing brains. Studies of ancient skeletons even suggest that many hunter-gatherer children had healthier teeth than later farming populations, whose diets became heavily dependent on grains. Then there was sleep. Today, babies often sleep in separate rooms, separate beds, sometimes even on different floors from their parents. For almost all of human history, that would have seemed unthinkable. Ancient families slept together. Infants rested beside their mothers or other caregivers every night. This wasn't simply tradition. It solved practical problems. Babies stayed warm. They could nurse without fully waking. Adults immediately noticed unusual breathing or distress. Researchers studying traditional societies have repeatedly found that close nighttime contact supports breastfeeding and helps regulate infant physiology. Of course, modern sleep recommendations exist for important safety reasons, especially in today's environments. But understanding how our ancestors slept helps explain what human biology originally evolved to expect. Despite all of these remarkable strategies, life remained incredibly difficult. This is perhaps the hardest truth in the entire story. Even the most loving parents could not save every child. Disease spread without warning. Infections had no antibiotics. Simple injuries could become fatal. Periods of drought or famine claimed countless young lives. Historians estimate that in many prehistoric communities, between 30 and 50% of children died before reaching adulthood. Those numbers are heartbreaking, but they do not mean ancient parents cared less. The archaeological record tells a different story. Infant burials were often careful and respectful. Some children were buried with flowers, others with small objects placed beside them. Parents mourned. Communities mourned. Grief is not modern. It has always been part of being human. Ancient people also searched constantly for better ways to protect children. Many medicinal plants used thousands of years ago are still studied today. Honey helped fight infections. Willow bark reduced pain and fever. Garlic showed natural antimicrobial properties long before anyone understood bacteria. These remedies could not cure every illness, but they reveal something important. Our ancestors never stopped experimenting, never stopped learning, never stopped passing knowledge forward. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden inside this story has nothing to do with babies at all. It has everything to do with people. Modern medicine has transformed childhood. Vaccine, clean water, antibiotics, emergency care. These advances have saved millions of lives. There is no question about that. But ancient humans possessed another kind of technology, one that cannot be manufactured, one that cannot be bought. A dense network of human relationships, grandparents, parents, older siblings, neighbors, friends. Everyone shared responsibility. No single caregiver stood completely alone. In many parts of the modern world, raising children has become increasingly isolated. Families often live far from relatives. Parents carry enormous responsibilities by themselves. Many experience exhaustion, loneliness, and overwhelming stress. Our ancestors would likely find that surprising, not because they were better parents, but because they understood something evolution had been teaching humans for hundreds of thousands of years. Children survive best when communities care together. So, how did ancient humans keep kids alive? Not with miracle medicines, not with advanced technology, not with perfect knowledge. They carried their children, fed them patiently, protected them through the night, shared the work, shared the responsibility, shared the love, generation after generation. For hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps humanity's greatest invention was never the wheel, or fire, or farming. Perhaps it was learning that no child should ever have to survive alone. If stories like this help you see history from an entirely new perspective, subscribe to Human Stories. Every week, we uncover the forgotten experiences, hidden science, and remarkable people who quietly shaped our world in ways history rarely celebrates. Thank you for watching Human Stories. We'll see you in the next journey into the forgotten stories of our past.